Hey, it's Dr. Jaime, and let me tell you about some amazing beef products that we love in our house. Certified Piedmontese is a healthier beef option that doesn't sacrifice flavor or tenderness. The cattle at Piedmontese are raised responsibly and carefully on family ranches across the Midwest, and they're healthier too. They're never given antibiotics, steroids, or hormones. They raise the rare Piedmontese breed through a ranch-to-fork approach that ensures traceability, environmental sustainability, humane animal handling, and responsible resource management at every step. Countless well-known chefs from across the country rave about the exceptional quality and flavor profile of certified Piedmontese beef. The Certified Piedmontese program is a source-verified ranch-to-fork operation that's rooted in dedication to the land, ranchers, cattle, consumers, and products. Progressive ranching protocols such as the electronic identification tagging technology, database tracking initiatives, DNA testing to confirm heritage, and voluntary third-party audits ensure the beef meets the high standards of care, handling, and quality. Certified Piedmontese beef has fewer calories, less fat, and higher protein per ounce than beef from any other breed, making it an ideal source of lean protein for a healthy diet. A serving of certified Piedmontese beef has even fewer calories ounce for ounce than salmon, yet it challenges the prime-grade beef products in tenderness. The combination of leanness and tenderness results in a consistently healthy and delicious dining experience for those who will not settle for anything less. And, well, you guys, that's me. So go check out Certified Piedmontese. They have a Dr. Fit and Fabulous beef box, or you can order any of their products using my code DRFIT, DRFIT. Thank you, Certified Piedmontese. Welcome to the Fit and Fabulous podcast with Dr. Jaime Seaman. Hello, everybody. It's Dr. Jaime, and welcome back to the Fit and Fabulous podcast. It's so wonderful to have you here today, and I have an amazing guest on today's podcast. I love doing in-person podcasts. You guys usually get to see me on Zoom or whatever it is, and you can tell we're hundreds of miles away, and technology is so amazing, but there's nothing better than sitting at the table with another human, especially somebody as powerful as today's guest, you guys. I want to introduce you to Kelli Thompson. She is a women's leadership coach and speaker who helps women advance to the rooms where decisions are made. She's coached and trained hundreds of women to trust themselves, lead with more confidence, and create a career that they love. She is the founder of the Clarity and Confidence Women's Leadership Program and a Stevie Award winner for Women in Business Coach of the Year. Kelli holds an MBA, has served as an adjunct management professor, and has more than 10 years of senior leadership experience in financial services and technology organizations. Her thought leadership has been featured in Forbes, MarketWatch, Parents, Huffington Post, and Working Mother. Kelli is from Omaha, Nebraska. She actually lives in my neighborhood, another small little side fact. And her favorite roles are being a wife to her husband, Jason, and mom to Haley. So, Kelli Thompson, welcome to the Fit and Fabulous podcast.
Thank you.
So I found Kelli a little while back because I found she wrote this new book called Closing the Confidence Gap. And I cannot wait to hear all about it. But tell us, everybody always has a story that leads them to projects like this. So give us a little bit more of your background and who you are.
Yeah, sounds good. So ever since I was a little girl, I've loved to read, right? I was the one where my mom could not keep the Sweet Valley High books stocked. I would go through them, right? The Babysitter's Club, whatever you read back then. And I always thought I'd write a book, but I just never knew what I would write about. And so, went off to college, did all the things, followed all the rules, got a job in banking because, it was supposed to be safe and you'd have good benefits and, all that sort of stuff. That was what my parents were like, oh, you should do that, And I remember even sitting in my boss's office one day, the roles that I was in was primarily, I was in sales roles, I was in training roles, human resources roles. And I just mentioned to her, I've always wanted to write a book, but I'm not really sure what I would write about. But one of the things we were laughing about was I said, but it will never be a leadership book, ever. But ever. Because at the time, this was 2008. And, if you're thinking back in 2008, who wrote the leadership books? We're thinking books by Jack Welch or Stephen Covey or Jim Collins, who wrote Good to Great. All of these leadership books were written by men. And so it just wasn't even a category that I could even see myself in. And so, I continue my years working in banking. I went to go work for technology organizations, overseeing HR. I went to go actually work for another author and did leadership development consulting and coaching and traveled all around. I was getting so tired of traveling. Like I was traveling like almost 50% of the time at some levels. I had just met my husband, and my daughter was getting older, and I was like, I just want to be home. And I was really lucky because I had this boss who was super supportive of me, and she said, and I told her I really loved all the coaching, but I didn't love all the traveling. And she's like, well, I don't want to be in the coaching business. So how about you just take this contract and you can go and, that will help you start your own business. So I did. In 2019, I started my own business, and I was just doing like generic leadership coaching, like coaching men, women. Companies would send their leaders to me and I would do leadership coaching. But then the pandemic hit. Mm-hmm. And unlike many others, when the pandemic hit, I lost like 80% of my income overnight because companies were canceling their coaching contracts because they're laying off individuals. I had some speaking gigs that I did have that got canceled because nobody's going anywhere. And so, that was also a really trying summer because we were going through IVF. I was having tons of miscarriages. And I literally thought to myself, if I cannot lose anything else at all, like, what do I want to do? And I'm like, I love coaching women. I've always loved coaching women. Growing up in banking and technology, I was used to being one of the only women in the room. I was used to having women come to me and say, how do I navigate this? How do I have this conversation? And so I just decided, well, if I can't lose anything else, I'm going to just go all in. And I started changing all my programs, my coaching programs, to speaking to women and women in leadership and the systemic issues that they face. And so I created the Women's Leadership Training Program that you mentioned and really just focused my coaching on women. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh, like this could be the book. And so that's just really how, the business continued to evolve. And once I went all in, like everything just came back and exploded. And then I just had all the material for the book because here I was years and years and years of working in male-dominated environments, coaching women and navigating my own personal challenges, that it really provided a tremendous amount of content for the book.
Wow. So I work in medicine, and there is a lot of equity problems in medicine. It has been a male-dominated field for a really long time. And in the obstetrics and gynecology world where I work, we're seeing this huge shift. It's rare now to see men in residency training programs, but just the surgery field in general, there are a lot of equity issues, pay equity issues. Women, are more burdened with the family and the things that happen at home. I've never worked in corporate America per se, so maybe give us a little bit of perspective working in technology and banking and things like that. What are the barriers and the equity issues that these women face?
Yeah, very similar to medicine, actually. And so what you find in the corporate world is very similar to what you're going to find in healthcare, where there's a pay gap. And you're going to find that either male physicians, male surgeons, even male leaders at the top are making more than their female counterparts. The other issue that you face, and I actually see this in healthcare as well when I have clients that come from healthcare, is what they call the unpaid workload of women. So just to kind of back that up and explain it, women spend on average an extra 2 hours per day doing extra things, usually around the house. And this is not just cooking and cleaning and stuff, but it's like picking up the kids, thinking about the kids. When do the kids have a doctor's appointment? How am I going to get them to that doctor's appointment, right? All just the other burden of labor, right, that women have. But it's at the office too. And I know that we've seen it in healthcare and in corporate. And what the unpaid workload at the office looks like is, can you take the meeting notes? A woman being the one who's picked to plan all the parties. Hey, can you plan this holiday party? Can you volunteer for this fundraiser? It just, women are like, gosh, yeah, I'm the only one around this office that knows how to run the errands, stock the break room, change out the printer cartridges. It's just little things like that. And the biggest thing that I see, really impacting women, and one of the things that, I talk with all my clients about, is how are we distributing the work? And not making assumptions that the woman is there to take the notes, or that she's a nurse, right? And not the physician, and just those little things like that. But that ultimately impacts the gender pay gap, because the more unpaid labor that you're doing at the office, the more likely you are to be labeled as unstrategic or not fit for leadership, because you're buried in these day-to-day tasks. And so, not only with the gender pay gap, but with the unpaid workload, but they still struggle with gender bias. Women who are more assertive or aggressive sometimes get labeled as bossy or lacking executive presence. And then, it's like a double bind, because if they're, labeled as sensitive or emotional, then they're labeled as not fit for leadership. And so there's pay, there's unpaid workload, plus there's just those gender dynamics that happen at work, where executive presence is labeled a certain way. And if you don't fit that masculine mold, sometimes you're penalized or not promoted into leadership.
Yeah. Wow. That's really interesting insight. because surgeons, I think of like you have to have this kind of like grit and tenacity and be able to, stand your own ground, or you just won't survive in the field, So I wonder sometimes, is it that, do women just succumb more to these things? And, like, let's start talking about, some of the solutions. I know one thing you talk about in your book is finding success in the first 90 days at your job. Mm-hmm. So talk to that person, because in corporate America, we all start right somewhere, like whether it's in the mailroom and you hear these amazing stories of people, climbing the ladders and proverbial ladders, per se. So let's talk about that. How do you start off on the right foot?
Yeah. And so I think, I have a lot of clients who work with me one-to-one, and many of them are making career changes. They're making career changes, one, because they've been in a career that doesn't feel fulfilling, or they're moving for more advancement. And one of the things that can happen in your first 90 days of a job is you go in, and it's actually really unsettling, because perhaps I'm speaking from my own experience. I'll just use myself as an example. I worked at a bank for 12 years. I'd worked in all the different departments. I just had built all these relationships. I was on their freaking TV commercials, right? So like I just had some of that relationship capital and currency, and like I didn't realize how much my confidence just came from the expertise that I built, or if I didn't know the answer, like I knew who was. But I wanted to leave, and so I went to go work for a technology organization. And I remember we were healthcare tech, and so I walked in, and we're in these meetings, and it's like a mix of like technology jargon and like healthcare jargon, and I'm like, I could be sitting here and they could be mixing a script from like The Office and Grey's Anatomy, and like I would never know I was being punked. And the reason why I say that is because I think a lot of times we go into organizations thinking that we're going to prove ourselves through our knowledge or our expertise or a certain leadership style, when really we get in there and we know nothing. And it's a huge blow to the ego, because it's like, oh my gosh, like if I'm not the expert, then who am I? Like, what do I contribute? And so what I advocate for in the first 90 days is, it's not how much you know, it's not the impression you can make on others. For really highly motivated, high-achieving women, it's not how much you can achieve in the first 90 days, because I know I talk to a lot of them, and they're like, I'm going to go in, and I'm going to do this, and 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 then they go in and they don't do all of those things, and they can become really frustrated. So what I tell them is to change their goal. Like, what if your goal in the first 90 days is all about the relationships you can build and how much you can learn? And it's not about having the right answers, but how are you asking the right questions? And so in that first 90 days, I'm really coaching my clients to slow down, build relationships, learn, because you have to have a little grace for yourself that you're going to be a beginner again.
Yeah. When it comes to relationship building, what advice do you have for women? Because you had kind of mentioned that women can come off as like overconfident, oh, this lady is a bitch, whatever it is, like, you're kind of in this new space, you want to, be friendly. How can women do that in a effective way?
Yeah. One of the tips that I give my clients, and maybe I have a certain sample size, right? Because I'm working with certain types of personalities who are really highly motivated. But what I often tell them is, you're going in and you're a high achiever and you have a lot of ideas. And so you're going in and you're in these meetings and you're presenting all these ideas. And as an assertive and forward-thinking and high-achieving person, it can be tempting to drop an idea in a meeting and then go off and keep running and do all the thing while everyone else around you is like, who is this new person and what do we want to do? And I don't understand. And so that can create a lot of like chaos and animosity when you're new, if you're driving really hard. So the tip that I give them is a strategy I just simply call 30-minute meetings. So if you are going in and you are presenting new ideas and you're an assertive, high-achieving, let's move fast, like ready, fire, aim sort of person, it's going to be really important for you to build relationships and get buy-in by not just developing relationships in the meeting, but schedule meetings, 30-minute meetings with your key stakeholders. Just going back, not to push your idea, but just to sit down and get to know that person and to ask questions, because you're actually going to speed up the implementation of your idea if you can be sure that everyone's concerns are addressed and they're feeling heard out, especially if you're trying to push a new agenda forward. So schedule meetings with folks, get super curious, ask a lot of questions. Your job is not to constantly push your agenda, but really just get to know people so they know, like, and trust you.
I think that's such great advice, because I think that at the end of the day, we really invest in people, right? Like even if we're spending our money at a business, it's usually because of, the people that run it, the people that own it. I think that's solid advice thinking about relationships. Okay, well, let's talk about making money because everybody cares about making money.
Yeah.
We talked about the pay gap that exists not only in medicine, but in corporate America. Why do women get paid less than men? And how can women negotiate to get paid for what we feel is our worth?
Yeah. So there's lots of systemic reasons why women tend to get paid less. So let's just take a step back and look at the things from a 50,000 foot view for systemic level. The corporate world, medicine, healthcare was started by men. And, they managed other men. Like they built these worlds, men built these worlds because, women just stayed home back in the day, right? Like we just didn't, enter the workforce. And so we're still working at a time where we are working in industries that were created for men, by men. And, so when women started to come into the workforce, there was unfortunately just gender bias inherent in that women were in traditionally lower paying roles, like secretarial roles, admin roles. And even when they did accelerate into leadership, there still was the gender pay gap. There's some other things that systemically perpetuate it. And I know some states have addressed this. I know I've written into our own Nebraska legislature addressing this. But for instance, let's just say that you're going to go and you're going to apply for another job in Nebraska. They're going to ask you, Jaime, what was your previous salary in each of those positions? Mm-hmm. And then many times HR leaders or managers are offering you a salary based on your previous salary. So if you're a woman or a person of color who has traditionally been paid less, they might think they're doing a great job by giving you a raise, but they're still not paying you market value or what they're paying men that have been in that position. So systemically, it can perpetuate itself. However, one of the things I talk about in the book is there actually is a study out of Wharton called the confidence gap. And what they wanted to understand was, why does there just seem to be gender-based differences in the way men and women advocate for themselves? And so what they did was they gave individuals a standardized test, but they did not tell them how they did on the test. And what they were supposed to do is, based on how they thought they did on the test, they were supposed to go and advocate their performance to potential employers and then, talk about their salary. And I think we can all guess who did a little bit better job advocating. It was the men. But actually the women did a little bit better on the test. And so one of the things they revealed is, there is this confidence gap. And I see it all the time. So I see it as a coach. I saw it as an HR person. I saw men apply for jobs that they just thought looked cool. Like, oh, this sounds awesome, right? Very Elon Musk and Twitter. Like, yep, I'm going to run that, because it sounds like fun, whether I'm qualified or not. Whereas women would come into my office and they would say, so this job looks really interesting, but I only meet like 9 of the 10 qualifications, and I just don't know. Maybe I should go back to school. And so there was just so much self-doubt in the process. So not only do men tend to apply for higher paying jobs in general, but when they do apply for those jobs, they're 4 times more likely to negotiate their salary. Women are not likely to negotiate their salary. They have lots of messages they've been told about why we shouldn't ask, or we don't want to look pushy, we don't want to look greedy. There's also data that shows that if women feel like they don't meet every single qualification, they will justify asking for a lower salary. Yeah. So there's just mindset differences in the way that we've been coached, that we've been raised, the messages that we've been heard. And so I am always working with women, because that's primarily my clients, I am always working with my clients who are primarily women on asking for what they deserve, putting together a salary ask that includes how to research market data. And you can go out to glassdoor.com, salary.com, payscale.com, and find salary data for the jobs that you're looking for. How to own their talents. And when they're presenting that ask, to say, hey, here's what I offer, and here's the results that I can bring, and how to craft and prep that ask. Because, as I say in the book, when I was growing up, I wanted to be a weather girl. I wanted to write a book, and I wanted to be the weather girl. But I didn't, because I didn't want to work the 6 and 10 o'clock news every night. But what I say is, money should be as easy as talking about the weather. And I think, my part in that is helping women get comfortable talking about money, while also advocating to employers and writing into legislatures to say there's also some things at the systemic level that we need to address this.
Yeah, that's so funny. I actually, when I was in undergraduate training, I kind of had a moment of panic. Like, what if I don't get into medical school? And I changed my major to broadcasting for 1 semester. I was going to be a news anchor. That's so funny. So when women get into these negotiations, how can they be more successful about getting what they ask for?
Yeah, no, that's such a great question. So step one, I want you to gather the data. Okay, so I want you to go out to those resources that I just mentioned and gather some salary data. Look for jobs that are similar to what you do. So many states now actually are required to publish salary data. So you can even go out to LinkedIn and find jobs very similar to yours and start to gather some data points. And so that's kind of step one. And I also tell them, know your organization's compensation philosophy. So, maybe they do pay middle of market, but maybe they're really big on flex time or other sorts of benefits or tuition reimbursement, professional development. So kind of know what your levers are. And then after you go and you get your data, then I tell them to present or pull together like 3 or 4 data points. Here's the things I've done for the organization. Here were the results. And here's the impact that I believe I can make moving forward. And so this is why I deserve this increase. I have them prep their script, practice their script. If you need to record yourself on your camera, if you need to tell it to your dog, like just do something where you can work out some of the nerves. You're still going to feel nervous when you go in, and that's okay. But then confidently present your ask. I often tell them a lot of things that we tend to do when we're nervous is we go in to our boss and we say, hey, I want to talk about my salary. Here's some of the data. Here's my results. Here's why I believe I deserve this. And then they present their ask. I think it would be fair, for me to be bumped up from $125,000 to $145,000. But then what they'll do is instead of just pausing and waiting, they'll go, but if that's not okay, then, just let me know. Like present your ask and remain silent.
That's hard.
It's hard.
In all conversations, it's hard.
Yeah.
To just sit. Silence is very uncomfortable.
Yes.
Yeah. It seems like minutes tick by hours.
Yeah.
When there's complete silence. Okay. I love that. So you've had some career path changes. I think a lot of people maybe feel this too, where you get into a role, you thought this was like what you wanted, the years go by and you're like, I don't know, this isn't for me. I want to change paths. Why do women have trouble, really aligning their purpose and staying with something for, longevity?
Yeah. Well, a lot of women, so I'll just use myself as an example. So I grew up small town. There was a lot of rules about what all the things that I should do to be happy and successful, right? So as many high achievers do, we just go and we're going to just check all those things off the list. I'm going to go to school and I'm going to go to grad school and I'm going to work at a bank because it's stable. And sometimes I don't think we actually stop and ask ourselves, like, do I even want that? Like myself and so many of my clients, like climb the ladder of success, just go and go and go, only to get to the top and realize, I think my ladder is against the wrong building. Mm. And so it doesn't feel good just to be, it's not like, I'll just climb back down and restart over. Like, no, I mean, there's a lot of baggage there. I mean, I've personally been in the golden handcuffs working for a great organization. It was well revered in town. I had a great position. I had awesome benefits. And so, I mean, there was even just like this own self-gaslighting where it's like, Kelli, get your stuff together. People want to work here. What is your problem? You need to work harder. And, I think that happens to a lot of women where we just, get well-meaning career advice, we take it, or we get promoted and we get the title and the salary and it feels good. But then all of a sudden, like that new job smell just starts to wear off. Mm-hmm. We get bored and then we're looking again. And, when I am usually working with someone on a career change, they're usually in their 30s when this starts to happen. They start to realize that, maybe I was going after things for the wrong reasons, for the money and the title and the salary. And I've never really stopped and asked myself, like, is this even what I want them to do or what I want to do? Yeah.
You talk about aligning your purpose with your paycheck. Mm-hmm. Tell me what you mean by that.
Yeah. So there's actually a 5-question career alignment check that I had to learn the hard way. They were questions I learned to ask myself when I was like, why am I so unhappy working at this amazing organization when everything on paper is supposed to be, it looks great. And so 5 questions you can ask yourself to align your purpose and your paycheck is this. Question number 1 is, do my values align with the company's values? And not just the values that companies have pasted on their website. That's just a pretty window dressing, but like, do they actually align with the way the company makes decisions? Let me give you an example. So I was mostly in marketing and training and learning and development. I like to move fast. I like to break some things. I like to innovate. I like to test. And here I was working for this 150-year-old bank who really loves rules and compliance. So there's, and folks in healthcare know that, right? There is rules and compliance on things. And so, there's nothing wrong with them as a company at all. Great company. But you know what? What I valued was creativity, learning, innovation, and our values just didn't align.
Right.
So do your values align with the company's values? I think that's check number one, because that can be a huge aha to say, oh, I love what I do. I might just be in the wrong field or industry. Question number two is, do I feel like I can use 80% of my talents every single day? Like, do I feel creative and in flow, like my talents are maximized? And if you don't know what your talents are, that's a good question to ask yourself. Like, what gives me energy? What makes me feel in flow? Like, where do I just absolutely geek out? And do I feel like I can spend about 80% of my day doing those things? Question number three is, do I align with the company's purpose and who they serve? You know, I just had a client, she was really excited. She got the CFO role, and she was excited about the role, but she was a little hesitant because she wasn't totally a fan of like the company's purpose and kind of who they serve, but she thought she could get past it. I actually talked to her recently, and she's like, you know, I just had to leave. She's like, I just couldn't get around who the company was serving. And I think that's so important to ask yourself that question. The fourth question is, you know, is this helping me advance my career goals? Like, is this moving closer to where I want to go in my career? Like, is this job moving me a step forward? So it's checking in with your values. Does this allow me to use my skills and talents? You know, do I believe in the company's purpose and who they serve? And then like, is this helping me move a little bit closer to my career goals? And then the final question is just to ask yourself, like, what's my energy level at the close of most business days? Because that's a huge burnout question. Because I remember like my long commute home, I'd be sitting there and I would just feel like I'd pushed a rock uphill all day. And it's a big difference to leave work and feel that good, energized, tired, because maybe you did solve a really big problem, but it feels good, like you accomplished something. And it's another thing to feel the burnout energy of like, I feel like I'm moving a rock uphill. I just can't make progress. It just feels so heavy. So really notice your energy, and that can be a huge clue if you're in the right role or not. Or feeling the energy when you go in and you apply for a job. When my clients are job interviewing, I always ask them, energetically, how do you feel after the interview? Energetically, how do you feel when you walk into the building? Like, pay attention to that. It matters.
Wow. Yeah, that really resonates with me because we are just seeing increasing burnout as physicians. And I think a lot of it is, you know, we went into medicine because it was just the altruistic, you know, healing, and you get into the hamster wheel and it's just like, see more patients, do more things. We're not going to pay you more. The reimbursement goes down, and you just feel this like, you know, moral injury, I guess, per se, like at the end of the day. And I think women, for reasons we've talked about, feel it more. You know, you're depleted at the end of the day, you're not energized, and now you have to go face, you know, being a mom and taking care of your family, and, oh, you didn't work out today. And like those things just really start to like pile up for a lot of people. Yeah.
And I just want to really emphasize, it feels like moral injury. Like, I felt that when you said that. And so many of my clients know when they feel that moral or energetic injury, because I know you talk a lot about health and fitness, but the things that I see is their anxiety goes up. Mm-hmm. They can't sleep anymore. All of a sudden they're going to a doctor because they're grinding their teeth. They have ulcers. They're yelling at their kids because you just said something so important. When they're burnt out at work and they come home, there is nothing left to give. And that's just a huge clue that it's time to just like take a pause and reevaluate, because it just starts to impact every mental and physical area of your life.
Yeah. One thing I really talk about a lot is I have this concept called pay yourself first. And what happened to me is I got into my medical career, had 3 children. I had a husband that was working as a police officer. He was working nights. We were doing all the things to survive and, you know, pay the bills and do all that. But at the end of the day, we were both so depleted. And I just thought that's what life was like, right? You're a mom of 3, your husband's working nights. And I went through a big tragedy in 2016, but I was eventually diagnosed with all these health problems. And so then what I started doing is I said, listen, how can I fill everybody else's glasses when my pitcher's empty? So although for women listening, it seems so selfish, I was like, listen, I'm waking up at 4:30. I'm going to get my workout in. I'm going to eat the foods I'm supposed to eat. I'm going to do all these things. And until it's done for me, it's not happening for you. Mm-hmm. I mean, you guys, literally, my kids, I'm like, you want lunch? You want school lunch? Pack your own lunchbox. Like, I just started saying to people in my life, like, listen, you got to do this on your own. I can't help you right now until I can do it for myself. And it just seems really selfish because women are such like givers and caretakers, and we always put ourselves last when it comes to, you know, the end of the day and what needs to get done.
I had to do the same thing in 2008 when my daughter was starting to get more independent, sleeping a little longer. I made a commitment. I'm like, I have to go to the gym because I was just grumpy and irritable and I just felt disgusting. I talk about it in my book. But that was a big thing. Like, I think I've been pretty consistent in going to the gym every morning since 2008. But the other thing too was as soon as my daughter was tall enough to reach the knobs on the laundry, she's been doing her own laundry because it was just like, I can't do and be all the things. I won't have anything left. So if you can handle your laundry by reaching the knobs, then we can have a lot more fun. So.
But these are like good parenting things, right?
Yeah.
If you continue to like just provide them meals and provide them, like, how do they ever, you know, it's kind of the whole, like, you know, verbiage of like, you know, teach them how to fish, they can eat for a lifetime, you know, kind of thing. So, okay. One thing you talk about, Kelli, is the power of reframing your flaws into gifts. Because right, we all have these insecurities and vulnerabilities, and I'm going to tell, this is a confession, you guys, like, I don't like to show my weakness. And, you know, so how can we actually reframe that to be more helpful to ourselves?
Yeah. Do you mind if I coach you on that a little bit?
Yeah, let's do it.
You?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
So what, growing up or in college or even just in your career today, what have you always been called? Like, Jaime, you are too, what?
Oh man.
Like, too assertive, too blunt, too bold, too aggressive, too sensitive.
Yeah, I think people think I'm like overly confident. Like, even my own husband said when he met me, he was like super intimidated. He thought I was like years older than I was, just because of how I present myself.
Yeah. So women have always been called something, and even men too, especially men who don't fit traditional gender norms. Like, they might be called, you are just too sensitive, like, man up, right?
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, so if you're listening, I want you to think about, what have you always been called? Like, I was always too direct. And some women are like, oh, I've always been called too talkative or too sensitive or whatever. But let me ask you, so you maybe were called, you know, overconfident, but like, how has that helped you, being overconfident? Like, what has that helped you accomplish in your life?
I mean, it's helped me go after things that I probably, you know, I don't show the fear. Like, if I'm scared shitless, like, I won't let it show. I won't let my weaknesses show, and I won't ask for help. Like, I will do it until it's done because I said I was going to do it. And so, you know, I had turned down college scholarships, and I asked to walk on at the University of Nebraska because that was my dream. Mm-hmm. I got waitlisted for medical school and reapplied the next year and got an early admission. You know, I had 3 children during my, you know, medical training. I mean, I have overcome a lot of things that I think I otherwise would have just backed down, you know, from if I didn't pursue life in that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it sounds like this just level of confidence actually has probably helped you more than it's hindered you.
Well, I think that as I've gotten older, I, you know, have realized that, I don't have to explain myself to anybody, you know, but I think that's something that just comes with time. Like, it's just cultivating that mindset of like, don't apologize, you know, for who you are. And, but it's not easy to do. And as a mom of 3 daughters, I worry about that, you know. Like, I was an athlete, so I always had body image issues. Like, so I always wanted to physically be smaller than I was because I thought that's just how I would like fit in. And even today I kind of struggle with that, you know. Yeah. It's just like you're always looking for this external validation.
Yeah.
And when you don't get it, it's hard.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And, you know, you just painted a really good picture of like, we all struggle with these things. You know, we all struggle with being told we are too something, too much, too confident, too direct, whatever. But yet I'll argue that those flaws are actually our greatest gifts. Like, there's actually like places in the workplace or in the world, or I mean, if we just like take a step back and think about the things that you've accomplished, there's no way you could have accomplished those things without that gift. And so what I encourage women to do in the workplace is I say, I don't want you to go to work and like temper yourself down. I don't want you to be less confident. I don't want you to be less assertive, less sensitive, etc. Like, let's balance this approach with your values. So if I asked you, you know, what your values were, like, what are your non-negotiables, or if you had adjectives that you wanted people to use to describe you, like, what would they be?
Yes, I'm definitely positive. Like I'm glass half full. It's really, really hard for me to even work with people who are glass half empty. And I could name those people like really quickly. I feel like at the end of the day, I want to feel like I made an impact in somebody else's life. Those are kind of the non-negotiables for me.
Yeah. So what I ask them to do and what I'd ask you to do is in those moments where you're wondering, because like what I've experienced, like when I was always told that I was too direct, the constant self-censoring is exhausting. And I don't know if it was for you too. I know you just kind of described it and told that story here. It's like the constant worry about my weight, my size, my approach, etc. Like that constant self-censoring, like it creates energetic injury. I'm going to use your term, right?
Yeah.
And it's just, we carry that and we're exhausted and we're sitting in meetings and we're thinking, ooh, I really want to say something, but I don't want to come across as overconfident. I want to say something, but I don't want to be too direct. And just that constant, it's just such an energy drain. So what I encourage them to do and what I'd encourage you to do is, what would it look like if you could blend your values and say, well, how do I be confident and positive? How do I be confident and make sure that I'm making a positive impact on this person? And so instead of like changing who we are, it's like, let's own these gifts that allow us to accomplish these great things. I have clients who've been told they were oversensitive and they were so just mentally mind trapped about that. But when we kind of do this exercise, they're like, actually, because I'm sensitive, they're like, that's why I'm so good at my job. That's why my customers love me.
Right.
That's why this. Okay, well, how can we be sensitive and balanced? How can we, so my core values are love, respect, family, creativity, and learning. How can I be direct and loving? How can I be direct and respectful? How can you be confident and positive, right? And really tempering that. So we're not changing who we are, but we're showing up and using this gift in alignment with our values.
That's incredible. Easier said than done, though.
It is, right? I know it is way easier, but you know, I think the more we practice it and the more we think about even writing my book, right? I'm like, one of the reviews said my book was a forcefully written guide, but then they also said something very nice about it. I'm like, yes, it was direct and respectful. You know what I mean? Like just being conscious and intentional about your tone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I was thinking about something as you were talking. So, you know what, in corporate America, right, you're always trying to like next level. Do you think based on people's values that maybe climbing the proverbial ladder isn't for them? Like, are there people that their values align better with being, you know, a worker bee, you know, per se, instead of like being in upper level management?
Yes. That's the answer. Yes. And let me tell you where people get stuck is I have people who come to coaching and say, you know what? I keep getting picked for promotions because they're a really good doer. Like my boss wants me to take on more, and they'll be like, I don't want that. Is that wrong for me to want it? Because I think there is just, again, it's kind of this patriarchal hustle culture norm that you're supposed to climb the ladder. And I think people feel like they're wrong if they don't want that.
Right.
And I think it's totally okay. If you don't want it, like you've been there, I've been there, and I know the listeners have been there. Nothing is worse than being managed by a person who does not want to be a leader. And I'm sure you've had people like that in your organization where you're like, man, you can just tell that they just don't love this job. So that's why I think, yeah, there are people who just want to show up, do the work, take really good care of patients or customers, and they have no desire to be in leadership, and that's totally okay. Because I love that they own that versus accelerating into something that's making them miserable.
Yeah, I think it's hard as you get higher. You're just managing people. You're not actually involved with whatever initially brought you like that joy, you know? It's like in medicine, it's like, I don't have any desire to be a healthcare administrator. Like I became a doctor because I wanted to like do surgery and touch people and talk to people. And the more you take me away from that, the more burden of like the electronic medical system and all of this, it's that moral injury. It's like, this isn't what I signed up for. Like, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So tell me what you learned by talking to so many different women, these conversations that you've had with women in confidence. I mean, obviously I feel like our personalities kind of align. We're like these go-getter, you know, people. What about people who aren't, you know, like us? What have you learned from working with all these different women? You
know, how normal all of this doubt and imposter syndrome is. Like I've had conversations with, you know, women at entry level, with introverts, extroverts, with people at all levels of leadership. I've had the opportunity to interview like people like Indra Nooyi, who is the former CEO of Pepsi. And every single one of them has admitted the same thing. Of course I felt doubt. Of course I felt imposter syndrome. And I think one of the things that really keeps women playing smaller than they should be, keeping them silent, is I think they think they're the only one. You know, I think they think they're the only one with the problem. And I'm sure as a physician, you can relate to this. Like women come in and they're like, I have this thing, and they just feel so isolated and alone. And I think that's what I've learned is just how normal all of these feelings are. And so that's what I've really tried to do in the book. That's what I try to do with all my clients. That's what I try to do in my programs is like normalize, normalize, normalize. Even the most successful women still feel doubt. Even the most successful people have still wondered, oh my gosh, am I doing the right thing? Am I going to be found out? Has all my success so far just been luck and I do the next thing and it's all going to blow up in my face? Like it is so normal. So I just really encourage all of us is like, we all have a lot of these dreams and we all share this doubt. So like, let's take our smallest, bravest next steps, even though we feel doubt, because, you know, confidence is a side effect of taking action.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people think that like, oh, I'm going to wait until I feel confident and then I'll do it. And I'm like, it doesn't really work that way. It's the actions of confidence come first and then the feelings follow.
Yeah. I also feel like when you feel scared, it's because whatever you're doing has worth and meaning and value. Because if it didn't, you wouldn't be scared, right? If it didn't matter, if I could throw the ball across the room, then like, you know, what would it matter? Like, you know, or you think of an analogy, like you're going to kick a field goal to win the football game. Like that is scary, right? But that's because like you signed up for this moment, you know? And so sometimes I think when you're like, oh my God, I'm terrified. It's like, okay, this is it right here. Like, this is why you're, you know, doing it.
Yeah, you're stretching your comfort zone. I mean, that's just like basic science, right? It's like when you're stretching your comfort zone, your ego senses a few things: fear, ambiguity, change, uncertainty, and failure. Like all the things that we hate. So like I joke in the book and with my clients, I'm like, isn't it really inconvenient that today's goals become tomorrow's imposter syndrome? Like today we're all excited about it. Like, ooh, I'm going to write a book. And then when it comes to publishing that book, you're like, oh my gosh, I hope it's not terrible. And I hope it doesn't end up in dumpsters. And so like, just know that just like you said, like if you are stretching your comfort zone, you will feel discomfort because your ego just does not like it. So it's actually a good thing. Like a reframe I love to use is, you know what? I feel doubt and imposter syndrome because this means I'm reaching my goals. Like this is what growth feels like. I mean, if we talk about exercising, right? When we break down muscles and they're sore, it's because we've stretched them and pushed them. And like our psyche really isn't that much different.
Yeah. I think it's like, it's hard to remember sometimes, like we're all humans. We all, you know, even with social media and things, like we put people on these like giant pedestals. And I think about that like with celebrities, you know, as I've gotten to like meet people, I'm like, these are just real normal people. And I saw you had a social media post, I don't know if it was yesterday, talking about Michelle Obama and how she said she had been in so many important rooms and sat at so many important tables and all of these different situations. And she's like, they're not smarter. Yeah. Like it is really true. Like it really like humanizes, you know, all of us a little bit. But, yeah.
100%. And, you know, I didn't probably have that big a realization until I went into coaching and I had CEOs come in looking for coaching. I had, you know, senior executives come in for coaching and I just had more exposure to so many different people. Like nobody has it figured it out. Like I just hate to break it, but like nobody has it figured it out. But it's just so tempting to put people on a pedestal thinking that they know better than us. And so, you know, I say it's, you know, stop overestimating other people's intelligence and underestimating your own. Because we just tend to put people on a pedestal, just thinking they have it figured out simply because we just don't know them. We don't know about all their worries and flaws, but I hear it and none of us have it figured out.
Okay. One thing we talked about was that women tend to have a lot of extra work burden at home, taking care of the family. You even said within the office, there's dynamics that put that burden on women. How can women ditch that unpaid work and get into, you know, being less of a doer to a leader?
Yeah. So in the book, I have a chapter called Lead More by Doing Less. And my LESS framework, LESS, stands for lose the reason why you say yes when you want to say no. Express your expectations and boundaries, shift from doer to leader and start delegating. So just to unpack those, you know, lots of times, especially like our high achievers, people pleasers, like there's a lot of reasons why we say yes to something when we really want to say no. And I'll just use myself as an example. Like for me, I said yes to a lot of things I didn't want to do because I was afraid, if I say no, people are going to think I'm not capable. So what happens is I say yes and I say yes and I say yes, or I'll do it because I want to look capable. But what happens is we say yes to all of these things and our plate gets really, really, really full. And what happens? I drop balls. my quality of work suffers because I'm exhausted and I'm overburdened. And so actually the opposite happens. The more I say yes, the more incapable I look because I'm not delivering quality results. So, really examine those reasons why you say yes when you want to say no. So that's the first one. The second one is to express your expectations and boundaries. I think a lot of times we just kind of fall into this place where like, people should just know, right? They should just know. But unfortunately, people are horrible guessers and they don't know. And so I give folks a boundary setting framework in the book that really just starts with, when people come to you and it's outside your values, it's outside your talents, it's outside your priorities, it's outside your skill set, thank them for thinking of you. Oh, thanks for thinking of me for this project. One of the things I'm focused on right now is A, B, and C. So unfortunately, I can't fit that into my agenda right now, but I'd be happy to talk with you about who else might be able to help you. Really collaboratively, not just saying no and be like, nope, can't, but like, how do we sit down and have a collaborative conversation around that? When it comes from shifting from doer to leader, we have to go back and think about why am I saying yes when I want to say no? But a lot of times it's really just changing that mindset. I was a leader, I was an HR person, and I think lots of times we just thought that once we gave someone a manager title, they would wake up the next day and be like, I know how to delegate and coach. I dreamt it overnight and now I know how. But really it's a big mindset shift because our whole lives we've been rewarded for doing. Gold stars, A's, oh my gosh, that project was amazing. Thank you for saving the day. Mm-hmm. And so all of a sudden now when you shift from doer to leader, you're not the one getting the gold stars. Like you should be the one delegating the gold stars, delegating the opportunities to get you the gold stars. All of a sudden, instead of just jumping in and doing and saving the day, which feels good and our ego loves it, it's, now I need to slow down and be patient and coach other people to learn and grow and save the day. And then the last one is to start delegating. And a lot of leaders tell me, well, I can't delegate because people make mistakes. But what happens is we wait until we are overburdened to delegate, and then the stakes are really high. Well, of course, someone's going to make a mistake if you're waiting till the stakes are really high, right? Like they've never done it before. So I really encourage leaders to say, you know what, you need to start with low stakes, safe opportunities for people to make mistakes. Like they will make mistakes. Mm-hmm. So how do you make sure that you create that environment when the stakes are low so that by the time the stakes are high, they've got some repetitions under their belt, right? And you're not just like kind of throwing them to the wolves.
Yeah. How can we delegate better at home?
By teaching your kids to do things. I'm probably like the worst person to ask because I've always just been that mom who I got divorced when my daughter was 5. I worked and I traveled and I guess I just believe in self-sufficiency. So it was just one of those things where I guess I always just had this mindset of I'm raising an adult. So when I thought about now my daughter is 17 and she's prepping to go off to college, I was already thinking about those sort of things. How do I make her self-sufficient so that she doesn't go out into the real world and panic? Mm-hmm. So can she clean the bathroom? Can she do her laundry? I'm the same as you. I'm once she was capable, I didn't pack her lunch. You need to learn how to feed yourself, clothe yourself, do your laundry, keep a clean house. And don't get me wrong, when she was little and I would delegate those things to her, she would do them terribly. I'm like, this is not what a clean bathroom looks like.
And it's hard to not just want to just be like, okay, I'm going to do this.
Yep. And so I would go in, I'd be like, actually, you need to lift up the toilet seat. You got to scrub underneath, all those sorts of things. But I will tell you, now I feel proud because my daughter has some pretty high standards for cleanliness. So, I know I have a lot of friends who really enjoy doing those things for their kids. And I think that's fine, but that just was never my mindset as a mom. It was always how can I make you capable and self-sufficient so you can be a thriving adult and not feel shock when you go out into the real world and have to figure this out.
Yeah. So that's great advice when it comes to kids. What about when it comes to spouses? If you've got a spouse that's also a high achiever and has their career goals, how can we help balance that portion of the home life?
So I had the unique opportunity. I got remarried in 2018. And so I had a household on my own. He had a household on his own. And so we were bringing in different styles, different expectations, just different rules of the house or whatever. And so one of the things that was really helpful to us, and I really even encourage my clients to do, is we just kind of had to sit down and kind of lay out what this sounds really like
a business meeting.
It was like a business, standard operating agreements. Here's the rules that we're living by. Here's the rules you're living by. But let's just talk about the division of household labor. And I mean, there was just things that I was frank, even when we were dating. I go, I just want you to know I will landscape all day long, but I refuse to mow the lawn. I go, I don't know what it is. I just don't want to mow the lawn. And I just want you to know coming in. Oh, and also I don't do laundry. Like, you do your own laundry, you're capable. And he's like, good, because I don't want you touching my laundry anyhow.
My husband and I do our own laundry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, you are not touching mine. He's like, you're not touching mine. So we kind of sat down, like, here's the things I enjoy doing. Here's the things I don't enjoy doing. And so we kind of have like our standard separation. I think it was helpful bringing in two different independent households. But, even when I was married beforehand, we just had to have those conversations. Like, I had to be okay with being vulnerable enough to be like, I need help. I can't do this. I would really appreciate if you would, do this chore or do this thing. And I think even some of my clients are just afraid to bring up the conversation. But I'm like, you're just feeling resentful without saying anything and hoping it's going to change without you actually articulating what you need. And I'll go back, people are horrible guessers. So just run it like a business. Like, here's our division of labor. Yeah,
communication is so key. I'm so thankful. My partner is so amazing. And we've had to have hard conversations like that. My daughter missed pitching practice a couple weeks ago. And I said, I can't do this anymore. I got to put you in charge. You're in charge of making sure she's where she needs to be when she needs to be. And it was like, oh, okay, this like burden was lifted off me. But I have trouble saying no. That's one of my faults. I'm a yep, because I think I can, do everything. And then the other thing I've really had to work on is not following that up with an apology. Like, oh, I can't do that. I'm really sorry. Like just having to explain yourself instead of, I love how you kind of like reframed that. Like, I can't fulfill that obligation. Thank you of thinking of me, really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Stop talking.
It's so important to like, nobody taught me. So I was married once and divorced. Nobody taught me, and maybe like they didn't have to teach me, but I guess I just never knew that you could marry somebody that wouldn't be supportive. It sounds like so like weird to say, but like, it's a thing. I think sometimes that we just assume maybe that when we get married or we find somebody, and then when we have kids, I think is the big thing. Oh, they'll just help 50-50. They'll change diapers. They'll do all this. But if you're not married yet, I would really encourage you to have that conversation about saying, tell me what taking care support looks like for you. What household were you raised in? What expectations did you watch growing up? Because here's my expectations, and we need to talk about if they match. So
I think when it comes to relationships, and it's not just like your spouse, it's any relationship in your life, these deep, meaningful relationships, I think the other person should be able to say what your physical, financial, and intellectual goals are. And if they can't say those things, like, it's not a very strong relationship.
Yes.
And I think some people are even just afraid to talk to their own spouse about those things, and then it's like, and that's what my husband and I do. It's like, okay, where are you at? What are your goals? How can I support you? And vice versa. And I think that's hard for women to do in the home, because they feel at the end of the day that they have to pick up the slack for the kids stuff and the cooking and the cleaning and the, whatnot. I do think that definitely still exists to this day.
I even talk about it in my book. I don't know if you call it, I was lucky or unlucky enough to have a do-over, but that was the big thing before I met my husband, was I got very clear about what my values were and what my non-negotiables were in terms of like marriage, relationship, what life was going to look like together. And I think it's just so important to be clear about that. I agree, and sit down and have that conversation, because I'm very lucky too. He's very clean. He's super helpful. He now is the step parent to this child who is not his, but you would never guess it the way he treats her. But that's because I stood by my non-negotiables. I'm like, I'm not going to settle. Like I did that. So yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you.
If there's somebody listening that's like, gosh, I don't even know what my values are. I don't know what, is important to me. Is there a place people can go for kind of this self-discovery?
Yes. Yep. Well, one, you can read my book. So in chapter 1, I talk about this a lot, and there's a toolkit you can download. But how you know what your values are, a good place that I actually like to start is this. Tell me what makes you feel resentful. Because, if maybe like disrespect or people name calling or not showing up on time makes you just boils your blood, maybe it's because respect is a value for you. So sometimes I think it's easier to start with the things that make you resentful, because I think maybe it could be that a boundary is being crossed. The next, places, and there's a bunch of questions I give you in the book to help you discern, and then I give you a list of words. But little things like what's meaningful for you? Like what qualities must be present in your life and relationships for you to make them meaningful and happy? What adjectives do you want people to use to describe you? What are your non-negotiables in terms of what you need in your relationships or your work? So there's some questions in there that you can ask. And then there is a word list too, because I think sometimes when we see the words, we can circle them. And I often tell folks, the first time you define your values, you might have a lot of shoulds. Well, my family said I should value faith, but no, I mean, like, let's get off the shoulds. Like values words should feel like peace in your body, like ease, like, yes, that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's really good advice. Okay, Kelli. So tell people, Closing the Confidence Gap, tell people how to find your book, how to work with you in some of your programs.
Yeah. So you can find the book really anywhere it's sold, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, all the places. It is in hardcover, Kindle, and audiobook if you like listening. So
is it in your voice?
It's in my voice. I read it. Yes, I read it. That was also a fun experience. But how you can work with me, just go to KelliRayThompson.com. I'm Kelli with an I and then R-A-E. I have one-to-one private coaching. I have a group program that I run twice a year in March and in September. And then I also offer team training. So I'm certified in the Enneagram. All my clients take the Enneagram. And so I do a lot of team training with the Enneagram in organizations, but I also go into organizations and do women's leadership training as well. So
I love that. I love that. Well, this has been so wonderful, Kelli. And I know you're going to change a lot of lives with what you're doing. And we need more strong, confident, powerful women out there. As mom of 3 little girls, I mean, I just, what you're doing means the world to me. I hope you know that.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening. Did you guys love that last episode of the Fit and Fabulous podcast? Well, of course you did. And I want to keep bringing you the most amazing content from the most incredible people. And you can help me by subscribing to the Dr. Fit and Fabulous channel. You guys know where the button is. Just click it. It's the doctor's orders.